Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Get French Football News Preview Show. I'm your host, Eric Devin, and joining me, as always, are Nathan Staples, Adam White, and Peter Bowler. France opened their qualifying campaign for World Cup 2018 with a trip to Belarus, where the match ended in a scoreless draw, a result which is frustrating, but perhaps somewhat mitigated by a draw between other contenders, Sweden and Netherlands in Stockholm. Bulgaria currently tops the group thanks to a win over Luxembourg. The under-21s, meanwhile, also played on Tuesday, defeating Iceland in style and Caen. Corentin Tolisso netting a brace in a 2-0 win. Macedonia's win over Northern Ireland means that Les Espoirs still need help to qualify for the tournament proper next summer. Now, with the international break in the rearview mirror and the Champions League ahead, we will take on what is actually a fairly mouthwatering set of fixtures this weekend. Before we do, though, I'd like to take a look at the scoreless draw in Belarus. Nathan, we'll start with you. We addressed this to some extent on the show on Monday, talking about how the win in Italy, but the draw in Belarus was a bit more frustrating. Obviously, individual players were not at their best in some respects, but how much of France's frustrations do you think were down to the system rather than the players in particular?
It's a tough one, isn't it? When you come away from any fixture and you've had about 20 shots with about 10 on target, you're thinking, well, you've knocked on the door in some extent compared to if there was a Premier League game where Liverpool had against Burnley where they had about one shot on target and one in the box, and you think, well, the problem's quite clear where it was. With this one, France for a long time bombarded Belarus, and they were just fractions off at moments. Giroud has two really good chances. He hits the bar as well. I think he should at least score the one where Griezmann does a sublime piece of skill. Everyone's probably already seen it. It's an absolute wonderful touch that sells about three Belarus defenders down the river. He plays Giroud through, and he has to score. And it's quite clear that he's not quite fit, which is why he's barely played at all for Arsenal so far, the system. But I'm not sure if it's so much the system as the players in it. I think that the 4-2-3-1 that he clearly switched back to in this game works better for the personnel he has, and the personnel we mentioned on Monday, Eric, they have better attacking talent than anything. So they need to utilise that to their best of their ability. And the question is, did they? And they didn't. And that's partially down to players not quite being at the full level and finishing opportunities. I'm not sold on the reason why you would play Moussa Sissoko, although he had a superb Euro final. I still don't know why you don't try and play one of those more adventurous wingers, or even someone like Dimitri Payet from the start, or it just didn't quite click, and they just needed an extra X factor, and unfortunately off the bench they didn't really have that. And with Giroud at half pace, with Griezmann maybe a little bit unlucky on occasions, with them not really finding that real killer instinct that they've probably missed for a little while, actually. They've not been ruthless enough in recent times anyway. But it'll be a frustrating one, but qualifying campaigns are very long and arduous, and a point away from home isn't the worst result, even if it's against someone like Belarus, where they will come out of that feeling they should have won, and one or two things going their way would have probably changed it. But I don't think the system's the issue. I quite like this 4-2-3-1, and again, I think it gets more of those exciting attacking players on the pitch, and that's what France need, because that's where they're strongest.
Adam, I'll come on to you. So, given Olivier Giroud's profligate performance, Alexander Lacazette must surely have been watching at home and rubbing his hands together with glee for perhaps an opportunity. We've seen a lot of teams in the recent past revert to the 4-4-2, whether it be with two wingers or in a diamond formation. Do you think there's something to be said for perhaps playing Lacazette and Griezmann as a partnership and dropping Giroud?
Possibly. I think it's definitely an interesting question, because I felt like at the Euros when they switched to that 4-2-3-1, it felt almost like a 4-4-2, because I think Griezmann's definitely, for Atletico, he's a striker, he plays up front, and Giroud was much better with that sort of someone playing much closer to him than they did in the earlier game, so it worked a lot better. But I think, for me, in international football, it's very easy to think we need to squeeze all our best players into one system. We have a system, but that should be the thing that's focused on, rather than how do we get our best players into it. So it might be sort of might have to bite the bullet and say, yeah, I let's go with Lacazette. He's probably the informed striker. He's probably better playing centrally in a 4-3-3. I think the diamond's a good idea as well. It's probably something that they would suit their players. You can move Payet into the middle. That would work. It's a classic French formation. Thinking about the Carré Magique in 1984. At the Euros when they won it then, I think it's something that's sort of embedded in French football kind of culture, and then it's always good in international football to sort of stick to your roots like that. So I'd like to see Deschamps pick the players that suit a formation rather than the other way around, and try and think perhaps we could go Griezmann and Lacazette together. Perhaps that might work. Lacazette's the more informed striker over Giroud. That would make sense. I think the Sissoko question is an interesting one. I think with that 4-4-2 as it is, he's worried that in a normal 4-2-3-1, that attacking midfielder drops back a little bit into midfield and kind of helps out a little bit more, whereas Griezmann as a striker probably doesn't. That's not something that he is adept at. So the reason Sissoko played was probably more as like a defensive or coverage in that sort of almost central area when you're playing that small 4-4-2 kind of situation. But I think it's Deschamps kind of definitely at the Euros kind of fell into that trap to pick like his best players and try and fit them into a system. It'd be nice to see Lacazette and sorry, who am I thinking of? Griezmann up front. Yeah, Griezmann up front together. That makes a bit more sense. Suits the players, suits the system, and perhaps is a bit more. It would work going ahead. So yeah, I would like to see that switch. I think it makes sense.
Well, Peter, I'll come on to you now. Continuing to play on this theme of a potential diamond, but looking more specifically at the role of Dimitri Payet. This is a player who has expressed in the past that he prefers playing on the wing. During his time at Marseille, he was used as a number 10, but expressed that he didn't feel that was his best position. Nevertheless, he does have a good tackling rate, a good work rate for a number 10. He also offers France quite a bit more on free kicks, and indeed, I think it would be hard pressed to argue against the fact that some of France's best opportunities on Tuesday came as a result of his free kicks. So a two-part question for you, I guess, then, is can France afford not to start Payet? And where would you see him fit into a system, regardless of its formation?
I think France can afford to not start Payet in the same way that they can afford to not start a lot of players, because it's a very, very talented squad. But I think it's fairly simple how you can fit Payet into that team. And if I'm honest, I'm going to be stealing the ideas that Nathan and Adam have already brought forward, because they're absolutely right. That France team should either be playing a 4-3-3, where you've got Payet out wide, or a 4-3-1-2, the diamond, and have Payet as the number 10. In both of those formations as well, you manage to get the best out of Pogba, because Pogba can play on the left-hand side of a midfield 3, and as France's best player, in my opinion, and I would say most people's opinion, he's the guy that you want to make sure is having a good game. I think if we look at that game against Belarus, I think there were three kind of major points that led to that fairly boring and lackadaisical performance. I think the first is that France went a long way in the Euros, as we all know, and they're going to be tired. It's incredibly taxing getting all the way to the final of your home country's tournament and losing. So I think we can expect a slowness, and we saw that slowness against Belarus, but there's two major positions missing for France at the moment. They don't have, in the starting 11s presented by Deschamps at the moment, that clinical striker. They do have one knocking about in Lacazette, but at the moment he's sticking with Giroud, which for me is just very, very odd. And also, I think you really saw against Belarus how much they miss Lloris when he's not playing. Lloris really provides not only organisation to that back four, but he also shows what a leader he is in the way he communicates throughout the game, the way he keeps players' heads on. And I think when he's back fit, I think France will start to look a lot more like the organised unit that we saw at the Euros.
Nathan, I'll come on to you. Obviously, with your club proclivities and being a fan of Manchester United, Paul Pogba had a fairly strong match against Italy last week, but was pretty anonymous on Tuesday, I think we would have to agree. What's Deschamps missing in terms of getting the best out of this player? Is it simply formation? Is it the players around him?
It's a little bit of both. I think formation-wise, if he does go forward with that 4-2-3-1, the positive for him is that's going to be his role at Manchester United as well, as part of that midfield too, as a box-to-box player. And the strange thing again is he was He was good on against Italy in that 4-3-3. He was poor. Well, he still created a number of good chances, but he wasn't on top form, shall we say? And he did dip out of the game for long periods. But in the 4-2-3-1 against Southampton for Man United, he was absolutely sensational, and he was asking for the ball. He was eager to get stuck in. He was willing to run with the ball and be a bit aggressive. But I think Pogba, maybe Deschamps needs to give him a bit of more of a mantle to take that role as being the important man in the team and giving him that freedom to express himself on the football pitch. I don't know if he's restricting him a little bit too much, because Deschamps is a bit worried in a 4-2-3-1 that, like we've already mentioned, if Griezmann's in that number 10 role, he's not going to track back. Payet will work back, but is he going to be fully back? And he's always concerned about being a little bit too defensive, and maybe that's restricting Pogba a little bit, because he will track back, but you can't hold him back. That seems to be the issue at the moment. He seems to too often think of not doing something because he's worried about his position a little bit, or it at least seems like that, because he has those little moments where he did a little lovely chipped pass in behind to Griezmann that was just a little bit too high. Little magic moments like that come out in Pogba's game, and you need to allow him the freedom to do that, I think. And like I say, the positive will be that he's going to get that role a lot more under Jose Mourinho and playing as that box-to-box in a midfield too. So that's the positive. But you know how good he can be in a 4-3-3. So if that works and that's going to make him incredibly more effective, then I don't see why you don't do it. The only reason I can see why you don't do it is because he wants to play Olivier Giroud. And yeah, we all know what he thinks about that. I still don't understand why he's not tried Griezmann on his own up top. I know he's a little bit lightweight, but he's not incredibly lightweight, and he's done it for Atletico at times before. And I think it's worth a risk if you're just pushing it to keep Giroud in the side. But yeah, Pogba will come good. There's not a worry about that. It's more Deschamps needs to give him a bit more freedom, I think.
Adam, I'll come on to you. Talking about the fullbacks, we saw Layvin Kurzawa come back into the side after nearly 2 years away. We saw Djibril Sidibe make his debut, and talk a little bit about their performances, not only on Tuesday, but over the two matches in general. Kurzawa was brilliant on last week, but not so much on the weekend. Did they do enough to maintain their places, or should they be worried about the October fixtures?
I think Kurzawa will be relatively pleased with his performance overall. As you said, he was great against Italy. Sneaky little goal at the near post to catch out Donnarumma, and had a good performance overall. Perhaps got caught out a little bit for the Italy goal, but France were dominant in that game, and he was a big part of that. I think with Patrice Evra looking like he's 35 now, perhaps he's going to be out of favour. He's maybe not going to get back in the team or in the squad. He was poor, I thought, for large parts of the Euros. Perhaps it's just come to the point where he's sort of, he's past his best and he won't be like a first choice player. And Kurzawa's been sort of Maxwell's understudy last season, and it was always kind of the plan that he'd take over at left back this season at PSG, and he was brilliant at Monaco, and it's sort of like he's been like strained to get out there and really show what a good player he is. And I think this season at the start of the year, except one terrible miss against Monaco when he really should have scored. But he's been brilliant overall, a couple of goals, looked really dangerous going forward. I think he's the natural successor at left back. Looking at right back, Sidibe, I think he's to some extent going to be a little bit worried about whether he makes the squad next time around. Whether Sanya's fit next time around. He's 33 to be fair, but he was okay at the Euros, a bit better than Patrice Evra. He's maybe still in the squad at least. So I think going ahead, though, it's between him and Sebastian Courchard. I'd have liked to see Courchard get a game, at least one of those games, perhaps sort of half in a friendly, perhaps, because I think those two players are relatively close. I'm actually, like we've discussed it on the pod before, I'm actually a bigger fan of Sidibe at left back, where he played for Lille last season. I thought he was possibly it's a slightly better position. But I think going ahead, Kurzawa should be, probably be first choice and be first choice at PSG. Now he's sort of overtaken Maxwell, so he'll be pretty confident of making the squad again. But at right back, there's sort of two or three players there who could really stake a claim. Sanya, as I say, getting a bit old, and Sidibe not really done enough. But, he did okay, but whether he'll keep his place is a big question. And of course, Sebastian Courchard's been brilliant for Lille, so it's pretty neck and neck between those three. So Kurzawa, yes, Sidibe, jury's still out, I think.
All right. Peter, I want to come on to you with one final question here. We talked quite a bit about Moussa Sissoko. Prior to the tournament, I personally had expressed surprise and doubts as to his even being included in the 23. Obviously, it turns out around with a strong tournament. He turned that into a move to Tottenham Hotspur. He's got Champions League football. And then he turns in not a great performance, especially going forward. With the likes of Kingsley Coman, Nabil Fekir, Ousmane Dembele, can Deschamps persist in starting him no matter what the formation?
No. I don't think there's much more I need to say to that. No way. I don't understand how he's still in the team. I don't even think he was that good at the Euros. It's one of the most mystifying things that's happened this season, other than David Luiz somehow managing to get a multi-million-pound move again. It's really, really confusing me. I think there's so many players for France who can do and contribute so much more. It really does mystify me. I mean, does anybody in this podcast right now think that Sissoko should stay in the team?
Absolutely not.
In the 11, no, but I think he has a role in the 23.
Yeah, I would agree. He's possibly got a role in the 23, but not starting.
Yeah, so does the kit man, though. The kit man has a role. So I think the only person who thinks that Sissoko should stay in that France team is Didier Deschamps. Unfortunately, that's all that matters.
A very strong verdict there from our panel on the role of Moussa Sissoko. So now, having recapped our international fixtures and just a hat tip to the under-21s who really did play wonderfully well. If they had shown that consistency throughout their qualification, they would be riding high. But as it stands, they need help to get into their group. Some fine performances there from the likes of Tolisso, Rabiot. Jean-Philippe Gbamin was playing at right back and did really well for me as well. But just difficult to see them potentially not qualify for another major tournament next summer. So moving on now to league football, we have quite a handful of really intriguing matchups this week. We'll start obviously with Friday's big matches. Saint-Etienne travel to Paris Saint-Germain. Obviously, Saint-Etienne have been a feisty and obdurate opponent over many seasons, and they built their reputation under Christophe Galtier on their defense. And we're seeing a PSG rather that have struggled to score. But Nathan, unfortunately, Saint-Etienne have a raft of injuries. Oussama Tanan, Soderlund, Polama. Sheikh Mbenge is back from injury, but it's still probably going to be a bit rusty at left back. Is this a bad time for this fixture for Les Verts, or should they take confidence from PSG's recent result?
Most people would say it's a bad time at any time to face Paris Saint-Germain, but I would probably say it's the best time to face them. It's obviously after that result against Monaco, it's probably knocked them a little bit, and it's made questions arise for Unai Emery. And you've mentioned the raft of injuries there. Some of them aren't so bad. Ousmane Tanan has been okay to start the season, but we've seen that Kevin Moni-Paquet's played quite well in a couple of games. They've still got Romano Muma and those wide positions, so that's not too much of an issue. Alexander Soderlund's only played one match, and Robert Beric has been solid, and we know he can be a decent striker, so that's not too much of a miss. Sheikh Mbengwe coming back, it's interesting because especially because Poloma is out, that gives them some added depth at fullback, even though I don't think they're missing an enormous amount, even though they do have injuries, and Saint-Etienne have been a bit indifferent at times. They were average against Toulouse. They were very poor in the first half against Montpellier, and then were excellent in the second half. And they were frankly a bit, other than the 2 goals late on against Bordeaux in the first game of the season, they were pretty distinctively bad then as well. But they will feel it's a good time to face PSG, but PSG will probably think the same about Saint-Etienne because they've played plenty of games, but they haven't quite hit their stride yet. They need to find that solid base again, which they seem to do against Toulouse, but at the same time, Toulouse really didn't offer too much either. And you worry about a classic big team backlash from a poor result and a little bit of a breakaway. I don't think they've got the strength up front to really scare PSG, even though obviously David Luiz is no longer there, but buying a mole that will do a load of molehills on the ground would probably be more obtrusive than David Luiz would be at centre-back. But they don't have enough for me creatively, Saint-Etienne at the moment, to really worry PSG. But they should go for it because I can't imagine PSG being on cloud 9 at the moment. So it is a good opportunity for Les Verts on a Friday.
Adam, I'll come on to you now. PSG against Monaco reverted to a 4-3-3. So I guess the question to you is, Javier Pastore was somewhat surprisingly given the number 10 shirt ahead of the season. Is this move to a 4-3-3 down to Pastore's absence, or is it a willful move forward on the part of Unai Emery to move away from the 4-2-3-1 that he's habitually used, especially during his time at Sevilla?
I think Emery will definitely, over the course of the season, will use both. I think the only issue is with the 4-2-3-1 is that with that attacking midfield role, I think Pastore is the only option that's kind of proved that he's going to be effective in that role. Hatem Ben Arfa can obviously play there as well, although at Nice it was slightly different. He was kind of either up front or he was in that A mid role as the sort of tip of the diamond sometimes. So I think with Pastore being injured this and their last game against Monaco, it kind of forces him to go back to 4-3-3 and play with perhaps Verratti and Matuidi and Rabiot and Kovac and players in there, because he hasn't really got another number 10 to replace him that he's confident with. And with various players coming back from international duty, tomorrow Ben Arfa is probably going to play out wide. So I think he'll use both because they suit certain sort of types of game. Perhaps in Europe he'll use 4-3-3 a little bit more. Away from home, perhaps he'll use that a little bit more. But games where they need to be more forthright and more attacking, perhaps away games in Ligue or home games in Ligue, where they don't need to think about sitting back and perhaps they would in the Champions League, where they might need to counter-attack in later rounds. That 4-3 will be more attacking and more potent. So as long as they can keep Pastore fit, I think that's still a very viable option for Emery, and an option he would like to use. I think that's sort of a formation that suits his style as well. But he's kind of forced into the 4-3-3 over the last couple of games with Pastore out. So I'm surprised that they haven't really signed another player that could, or perhaps have moulded their squad into a shape that might suit that 4-2-3-1 a little bit more. Because Pastore over last season, his injuries were so he was like erratic, wasn't he? He was barely in the side, kept getting little injuries, had 2 or 3 at once at some points, and you would imagine that that's not the best injury record, and he might struggle again this year. So if they can't keep him fit, they can't really play that formation to good effect. So over the course of the year, they'll use both, but without Pastore, they're kind of forced into a 4-3-3, which is a formation the players know well. I mean, Emery's hasn't, like I said before on the pod, he hasn't revolutionised the style. It's been more evolution, so he's happy to play that 4-3-3, especially in Ligue 1, because it's proven in this division. So I think when Pastore's fit, he'll like to play 4-2-3-1, but without him, 4-3-3 is fine for now, at least.
Peter, I'll come on to you. We have a few notable arrivals to the team, whether it be a signing or a loan return in Grzegorz Krychowiak and Alphonse Areola, are obviously players that Unai Emery favors. Krychowiak having played under Emery at Sevilla, and Areola having been a player familiar to Areola being a player familiar to Emery from his time on loan at Villarreal last season. It's obvious he has a propensity for these two players, but we saw this a little bit with Ancelotti, with Laurent Blanc, with certain players being played seemingly ahead of other players irrationally. I can think of Alex, maybe Maxwell to some extent last season, David Luiz. Are his hands still being tied? That is Unai Emery's hands still being tied by the hierarchy at PSG in terms of who makes the pitch in a given week?
No, I'm not so sure. I don't think I'd want to make that accusation because I'm not sure what basis somebody would have to claim that the hierarchy of picking the team. I think it's very easy to, as pundits and analysts, to be able to look and think, oh, you signed all these players, put them in the team, get them playing. You know they're good players, why aren't you playing them? I think shocks to the system like that can really damage teams sometimes, and I think Emery's smart enough to know that actually you can't just go and chop and change and put 5 players in all of a sudden, because it doesn't work all the time. Sometimes you need to slowly work players into the team. I think that's all that's going on there. I think Motta will eventually start playing less. I think Krychowiak will come into the team because he is, as much as I hate to admit, because I'm a big fan of Dario Motta, I think Krychowiak is a better player, and I think the same with Areola. I think he'll slowly come into the picture as well. I've never been wholly convinced on Kevin Trapp, but this kind of idea of Emery's player selection being the most puzzling thing about PSG at the moment, it's strange all over the board, because I don't know what you guys thought, but you've got one of the best players in Ligue 1 last season in Ben Arfa, a number 10, someone who's played number 10 all season, sat on the bench, and instead you decide to play Verratti, who, in my opinion, is someone who's much better utilised when he's allowed to just spread the ball around, sitting behind Cavani. I couldn't really understand that. I think there's things that Emre can do quite easily to fix this team, but again, we're back at that decision as that the only person that seems to think that these players deserve to be in this team in this shape is the manager. It's a strange one.
Nathan, we'll come on to you. So we saw reports earlier this season that Maxwell has not been practicing every day this week. His fitness is still in some level of doubt. Levan Kurzawa essentially played 180 minutes of football over the international break. And, you know, there's a similar issue at right back with Thomas Meunier being really the only fit right back with Serge Aurier's injury. With the fixture congestion that PSG are going to face over the next month or so, are the team running a risk of overusing some of these players?
It's going to become a little bit of a worry, yes, when the Champions League starts, but they do have quite a big squad still and plenty to pick from. But you rightly mentioned that they're slowly running out of options in defence, especially with David Luiz leaving. But in the case of Kurzawa, he didn't play too much in this last season. He didn't play in the summer or anything like that, so he's had a relatively decent rest. And I always think, especially a player like that, if he's playing well, keep playing him. He's young, he's fit, he will be loving playing every single minute of every single game. So keep him going, keep that engine running, because he's in fantastic form to start the season. Keep him clocking forward, because he's really growing into that player that we saw a couple of years ago at Monaco, where we thought, right, this kid's going to be something a little bit special, and keep him going. In terms of right back, losing Aurier is a bigger, depending on how long he will be out, is a bigger blow than it probably would have been, say, a couple of weeks ago, obviously, because Luiz has left. Because not only he's their first choice right back, he's their other option for centre back if any of those three of Kimpembe, Silva, or Marquinhos aren't available now. He's essentially that fourth centre back. So hopefully they'll hope he can be fit soon. But Meunier's shown that he's good enough at right back. This is the reason he was bought for. He'll obviously need to be used again in January with Ivory Coast qualifying for the African Cup of Nations. So he'll be important. To get that game time now is actually quite helpful to him, so that he can get more used to the team in a competitive environment. He came on against Monaco for a bit and did reasonably well. I think he helped expand the game and pushed it a little bit more than Aurier did. And the worry will be is if these players continue to be unfit, if Silva starts struggling again, obviously he's missed part of the start of the season, if Maxwell can't get fit, if Aurier's out for a while, then you're starting to lean on options like, do you play Marquinhos at right back? That might be an option, but then you're relying on neither Kimpembe or Silva getting injured. It does start getting to a worry with the amount of players that are falling victim to the injury bug, but at the same time, what do you do about it? There's not really... I can't see another option of how PSG could really avoid overusing the players when they've got a couple with niggling worries.
Adam, I'll come on to you then, talking about Meunier. With him set to start, he's obviously a very talented fullback. He performed fairly well for Belgium at the Euros. He's looked bright enough in preseason and his cameo at Monaco, but he's certainly not as direct of a player as Serge Aurier is. Do we see his influence having a net negative effect on PSG going forward, or is he just going to offer a different approach?
I think it's definitely the latter. At Football Radar, the Belgian analyst who covers the Belgian League is a big fan of Thomas Meunier, and he said that he was brilliant at the beginning of last season, but perhaps tailed off over the course of the second half of the season. And what was, as you said, was passable at the Euros, was decent, but I think, given that he's now moved to a big club, he's 24. This is like his sort of big opportunity. So I'm a fan of his. I think he breaks forward really well. He's great going forward. Good cross with the ball. Scored a couple of brilliant goals against Real Madrid in pre-season. I think he's just a different type of player. He's not great defensively. So in Ligue 1, he's going to be very useful because he's going to be bombing on. He's going to be getting it at his fullback, at his winger, pushing that side of the team back. But in the Champions League, they definitely prefer the Aurier approach because he's much more combative, he's much more sturdy, he's much more defensively sound. So I think it's just an option for PSG to be using it. And Nathan mentioned the the African Nations Cup, and I think they're quite lucky that I don't think there are any Champions League games in that January period, so Meunier only be playing League and Cup games, so that kind of works well, where PSG, the dominant force, he's going to be pushing forward. So a different approach for Meunier, but not a less effective one in certain games. So he's worth that more attacking option, and I like him. I think he's a good player, and it'll be exciting to see him at PSG, but not the first choice. Or is the better player overall, more solid, more defensively sound, and he'll be first choice going forward. But Meunier is a good option to have.
All right, conclude our PSG Saint-Etienne discussion. Peter, I want to come on to you. Edinson Cavani scored twice against Paraguay. Certainly be a confidence booster for the big Uruguayan. Is he finding form, or should Emery take a risk on the likes of Hesse, who appears set to be fit for this match?
No, I'd stick with Cavani scoring goals. The goal he scored against Monaco, as dreadful a game as that was for PSG, was quite a good, deft little header, actually. He's starting to get himself in the right positions, and I think you'd be daft to write off Cavani as being past it. He's one of the best strikers in the world if he can find that form that he had at Napoli. And I think it's taken him a while to kind of get used to no longer being able to hide away in the shadow of Ibrahimovic. He's going to have to sort of grow into that main man role. And it looks like maybe, slowly but surely, he's starting to. So why not? I'd certainly play him.
All right. So certainly a great, exciting match of the week. A lot to look forward to. PSG's evolution, Saint-Etienne's ability to work in some of these newer players, Henri Saivet, Jordan Veretout. And I want to get our predictions. Nathan, I'll come on to you first.
I can't see Saint-Etienne doing too much in this game, really. PSG bounce back with a nice 2-0 win.
Okay. Adam?
3-0 for me.
And Peter?
I had 2-0 PSG.
All right. I'll try and mix it up and do a different prediction. And so no one's got the same one.
Oh, okay. I'll go 5-0 again then. Why not?
All right. I'm going to go with 2-1.
Go hard or go home.
All right.
Yeah.
We will have next week a little update on our standings in terms of these predictions. So now we're going to move on now to another match, which is interesting. We're not going to spend quite as much time on this, unfortunately. But we have surprise leaders Guingamp hosting Montpellier. This is a match that's being played in the multiplex on Saturday. So Nathan, I'll start with you. Addressing a player who you wrote a nice piece for on the site a few weeks ago. It's Ludovic Blas. With Mustafa Diallo a bit of a doubt fitness-wise, is it time to give him a look as in the starting 11?
It's an interesting one. Initially, to start off, I hope that Mustafa Diallo is fit for this one because he's really been really excellent to start this season. And it's sort of come from a bit of nowhere. He scored again just before the international break against Nancy in the 2-0 win, and he scored I've mentioned it before, it's an absolute sublime goal against Monaco in the opening day of the season. But he's really, at 30 years old, you'd never thought that a player could really make a little bit of a mini renaissance. But Diallo's had a really nice start to the season, and he's been involved in attacking plays and actually really been a crucial part of what's been a really interesting midfield for Guingamp with Doe in there as well, and Thibaut Gores was in the last match as well. It'd be interesting if he doesn't play because, like we say, that means it will be a starting berth for Ludovic Blas, you would assume, because he's at least been a used substitute in all the 3 games. And while against Monaco, obviously, he gave away the penalty that really sparked their renaissance, which is a slight mark on him, but he's been solid and he's a really exciting young player. He did excellent in the summer for the under-20s, and when you're a Ligue 1 fan, you always want to see these young, exciting footballers. We all remember last year the players like Ousmane Dembele and Vincent Cosiello coming out from seemingly nowhere to really impress. That's the exciting thing about football is young players like this. And Ludovic Blas, along with a couple of other players dotted around the league, he's one of those players that is intriguing and has got interest from abroad. He's decided to stay until 2020, which is great for Guingamp, absolutely fantastic for Guingamp. Applause to them. And Blois for staying as well, because that's going to really help his growth. And against a team like Montpellier, this is the perfect game for them to slot him in, because Montpellier aren't in the greatest of form. I think he's a more natural replacement than others for Diallo. So yeah, give him a go. Let's see what he's made of, and give him that starting berth to gently progress his career. We know that Antoine Kombare will know exactly how to use him, and I think he'll agree with us that it's about time to give him a little bit of a nudge out the door.
All right. Adam, we have a Guingamp side that have started the season off pretty well. But that being said, they still have a lot of important players to come back, namely Nico Benezet, Pereira, Etienne Dito was signed from Toulouse in the summer. They're still to come back. Is Kombare going to have a difficult time balancing playing time for this team, especially with the wealth of younger players that they have? Thinking particularly of Coco and Blah.
Possibly, yeah. I think he might do, especially when you look at that midfield area. They've got Saliba, Coco, Luca Do, Benezet, as you say, Blah and Diallo, Dido, Thibaut Giresse. They've got so many options. But I think it's a good problem to have. I think it's one that Kombare will be pleased with, because with the young players coming through, he's given perhaps options he didn't necessarily like. Blah's come out of pretty much nowhere at the end of last season that he didn't have before and didn't expect. So apart from Saliba, a lot of those players are relatively similar in terms of, I think you'll probably see them relatively similar in terms of ability. And he's got the option to play 4-4-2 or play 4-2-3-1. So he's got that sort of versatility in that midfield area especially. So I think he will have trouble balancing playing time, but with the players he's got, he can rotate quite sort of well. He can use those players in certain situations to suit games, to suit scenarios in certain games. And I don't know that any of them are going to be thinking, apart from perhaps Saliba in that midfield area, I should be first choice, I should be starting every game. I don't know if any of them are going to be feeling like that too much. So I think it's a really nice problem to have in that midfield area, to switch between 2, maybe 3 different formations. And I don't see it being an issue with the squad. So a good problem to have. I'd like to take this opportunity to say how much I love Thibaut Giresse. I'd like to see him play a lot more than he does. He played a lot at the end of last season, but it's the way he sort of glides around the pitch, and he sort of carries the ball so sort of wonderfully. He's got so much style. I'm a big fan of his, but got lots of good talent in that midfield area. So going forward, surprise leaders, perhaps a top half finish is on the cards for them. So versatility in that midfield area, he'll be pleased with that.
All right, so Peter, to conclude our little discussion of our match in Brittany this weekend, the transfer window, turning on to Guingamp's opponents here, the transfer window closed without Montpellier adding anyone else. Are they going to be okay this season? And if so, is it going to be on their own merits or because there are 3 worse teams? I personally argue, and I want to hear your response to this, that it's a bit of an indictment on Ligue 1 if a team that's basically Morgan Sanson, Riyad Boudebouz, and 2 decent center backs avoids relegation.
That's a very, very good point. If I'm honest with you, Eric, I think it will be a mix of the two. I think there are worse teams than Montpellier in Ligue 1 this season. Don't think there's too much argument about that. And I think you're right in your suggestion that they don't have enough quality to really justify doing anything but fighting relegation. But at the same time, they've put in some hearty performances recently. Not all teams necessarily have to buy their way out of trouble. And I think it's credit to Montpellier at the moment that they're actually not looking like a team that have recruited as poorly as they actually have. When I was making my notes for this match, I rewatched all the highlights of the Montpellier's last game, and I really couldn't believe how vital Boudebouz is to that team. He does everything. He does all the work. He creates the chances. He moves the ball around for them. And if he were to get injured, I think Montpellier could be in real trouble. So if you're watching Montpellier this season and you're thinking about, are they going to stay up? Are they not? Just have a look if Boudebouz is fit, and then base your decision on that. Because I really do think he's the complete linchpin of that side, and without him, I think they'll really struggle.
Yeah, that's their biggest move of the summer window. Keeping Boudebouz absolutely vital.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, so we'll get some predictions now. We'll start with you, Peter.
5. No, joking. I'm going to go 1-1 for this one.
All right. Nathan?
I like Guingamp in this one. I'm going to go 2-1.
2-1. Adam?
I'm going to go 0-0, I think. Going to be a bit conservative there.
All right.
Gentleman's result.
I was going to say 1-1 as well. I'll go with a 1-0 win for Gangab. Okay, so moving on. We're moving back in time, I guess, chronologically here. My apologies for setting this up poorly. We're going to look at the early match on Saturday as Lyon hosts Bordeaux. Nathan, we're going to start with you. Emmanuel Mamana, the new center back that that Lyon had acquired over the winter window, was sent off for a straight red card in a reserve team match, which leaves the club with no recognized center backs in reserve. So Mapu Yanga Mbiwa and Nicolas Nkulu, despite their poor performances, are set to start again. Is central defense Lyon's weak point at this point in the season?
Yeah. Other than possibly right back as well, which you've mentioned, that Raphael's not had the greatest start to the season either. You do worry about them at centre back because although Mapu Yangambiwa and Nicolas Nkulu are perfect examples of Jekyll and Hyde players. Like one week, like we saw in the first couple of weeks, they're pretty solid, and they can even be really good. But they have their moments where they will switch off and they will look at each other and look at players around them, and then the opposition will score. And that happened on 4 occasions at Dijon, and it led to 4 goals, and they lost. They need to step up for me. They're both old enough and senior enough to really command better, and they should be doing better. They've got good protection in front of them from Gonalon. They've got a good goalkeeper behind them, so they've got no worries about that. That can usually be a concern for centre-backs, but they need to step up to the plate in this one. They need to prove their worth, both of them, because you've mentioned Mamana is coming, and although he's obviously suspended for this one, when he does come back, he can put pressure on them. But they should be fully aware that that will be exactly where Lyon are looking come the winter window if they keep struggling, because if Lyon are just about still in the Champions League, if they manage to squeeze through, they'll be desperate to get centre-backs, and they'll worry about that. But I agree with what you've mentioned already, Eric, in a couple of weeks ago on the main show, that Raphael's a real worry. I wanted to mention that I thought he was excellent for about a season at Man United, and it was a very similar situation to what we had with Luis Nani, which was he had an excellent season, and then an injury or two significantly derailed him, and in fact probably ruined their careers in one way or the other, because Raphael's never been a good enough defender and never been positionally sound. But the difference was when he had that successful season is that he could get back and he could track back, because he still has solid pace, but he doesn't have the engine anymore to get back and forth up the right hand side often enough. So he's caught out way too often, and he can't recover with his tackling because he's not a good enough tackler, and that's going to be exploited in this game, I think, from Bordeaux, of their excellent wide players like Malcolm and Torre and Unas. It's going to be a tough one, and I'm worried about this game for Lyon if they're having to play Yang and Biwa and Nkulu against someone like Diego Roland, who's going to sit off them as well, which is not what they want either. They probably want someone next to them so they know where they are. There's no doubt Lyon's defence is their weak point at the moment, and Bordeaux should look to take advantage of it.
Adam, I'll come on to you. Another question about Lyon. Rachid Ghezal looks to be back in the side after returning from injury in place of Nabil Fekir. Given Fekir's tentative form, can Ghezal make right wing his own position? He was brilliant down the stretch, but Fekir obviously has the pedigree. Can Ghezal keep Fekir out of the team when they're both fit?
It's an interesting question. I think a fully fit, fully firing Nabil Fekir is a far stronger option than Rachid Ghezal. As much as Ghezal was great when he came into the team, like really burst into the team through Fekir's injury, sort of the midpoint, end of last season sort of time, I think the difference between the two players is on top form is still quite a big one. So it depends a lot on whether Fekir can rediscover his fitness, because he did look a bit, although obviously he had a long time out, he did look a little, not just unfit in terms of his injury, but also like really lacking match practice and match fitness, as you would, having been out for so long. But if he can rediscover that fitness and rediscover that form as a result, then I think Fekir starts every game for me. But Ghazal's a very, very good player. We proved at the end of last season what a good option he is, and he started to make that position his own. You kind of a little bit forgot about Fekir when Leon really started to play well under Genesio with Ghazal in the team. He was in really good form. But with all things being equal, and then both fit and Fekir not injured, he's not always over the international break. He hasn't been had a bit of injury trouble again, but. With them both fit, Fekir's the better player and would start. But if Fekir drops out of the team again with injury and he's really struggles again over the course of the season, Ghazal's got an opportunity there. Like he could make that position his own, but it would be almost by default. I think Fekir's the stronger player and the better player and the more talented individual. But that's not to take anything away from Ghazal. He's a very, very good player. But Fekir, for me, if all things being equal in that position.
All right, Peter, a final question then. We saw last week Bordeaux turn in a really stalwart performance against Nantes in the Derby d'Atlantique. What a difference Carasso coming in made. Again, Nantes are not the sharpest team offensively, but can he be the missing ingredient that Bordeaux need to sharpen up and be back where they quote unquote should be as a European contender?
Yeah, he's a wonderful, wonderful goalkeeper. He doesn't get enough credit as well, actually, I don't think. But I'm not sure a goalkeeper can ever really be the player to provide what it is that Bordeaux need. And Bordeaux need to be more clinical up front. They wasted so many chances against Nantes. They could have won that game by 2-3 goals. And I do think to myself sometimes that whenever I've watched Bordeaux over the last couple of years, they can never get all of it right. They either have all the options going up top and have an awful defence, or they have a fantastic solid defence and no options up top. It's like this kind of awful catch-22 that they can't seem to get out of. I think Menez over Carasso is going to be the difference for them. After watching Nkulu and Yang Biwa for Lyon last week, and watching how suicidal the pair of them seem to be on the pitch, it's just absolute disaster waiting to happen at times. I would wonder if Menez might be on their case and really trying to exploit them. It's going to be a good game.
We'll get predictions now. Adam?
1-1 for me.
Peter?
2-1 to Lyon.
Okay. Ethan?
2-0 Lyon.
And I am going to go with a Bordeaux win, 1-0.
Oh, it's tense.
Despite my Lyon.
So tense.
Okay, so our last match of the weekend is Sunday's Grand Choc between Nice and Marseille. So a bit of a rival here, both teams on the south coast, and never a dull moment when these two meet, despite no matter their circumstances. So Adam, will come on to you first. Nice appear to be going all out to play all of their lovely new toys at once. 3-4-1-2 looks to be the way that they'll set up, with debuts being handed out to Dante, Mario Balotelli, and Eunice Balanda. My question, though, I guess, is a little bit tactical for you. Do you feel that there's enough support in central midfield with Jean-Michel Seri and Vincent Coziello as that central midfield too?
It depends. I think last season when they played that 4-4-2 diamond, which is kind of the sort of standard formation, I think they've got a lot of strength in that position. It was numbers with the sort of three central players in that kind of attacking midfield. In Ben Arfa, obviously he pushed on a lot, but there's still like strength in central areas. When you move to the four in the midfield, okay, they've got the three centre backs and the two wing backs. Those two central players, which are probably, as you said, will probably be Coziello and Jean-Michel Seri, might be a little bit isolated without the strength of perhaps Waylon Cyprian there or Mathieu Bodmer in there. They might get outnumbered in that position if they can't sort of mould that formation to suit them in that area. I like the signings they've made, however. I think Dante, Balotelli, and Bahanda are really useful signings, and I worried about them when Ben Arfa went, because he was so important. He was the team almost a lot. They had a great defensively, they're fantastic, but I think he was the X factor that made them the team they were last season. But they've actually strengthened overall, considering that loss of Ben Arfa, really well. So I think they need to think about how they can protect those two players, because if they get outnumbered in those positions with the two of them in there, that could be a big negative for them. So I think it depends a lot on how they mould the wider players. Where those wider players are going to be moving in, they're going to be more midfielders, they're going to be more wing backs, they're going to be more fullbacks. I think if they can use those to perhaps cut in and help out in central areas, and perhaps some of the two or four players behind Balotelli can sort of help out as well, then it'll be fine. But they've got to be careful not to leave those two isolated, especially when you play against a 4-3-3 and you've got three central players like Senesian often do. Then as an example, they could get outnumbered in those areas. But I think it still remains to be seen whether they can protect Cosiello and Tomislav Sari. So it'd be interesting to see going forward. But it's an interesting setup, isn't it? I'm looking forward to seeing them play. They're one of the exciting teams now. It's going to be fun.
Peter, we'll come on to you. Will these new signings, Nice seem to have a real youth movement this season. We already had the likes of Johan Cardinal and Vincent Cosiello well established in the team, but over the last two windows, they brought in the likes of Remy Walter, Ono Losamba, Willian Cyprian. Will these new arrivals frustrate these younger players that they've signed? Is this change of philosophy?
No, I don't think so personally. I think if anything, they'll only have a positive impact on the young players. I think if you're a young player coming into a team, the one thing you want is to have older, maturer players who have been there, done that, and players that you can potentially learn off of. I mean, Dante is an absolutely fantastic signing for that. He's going to teach them so much. He's got so much experience playing so much Champions League football. And I think Nice are going to be really, really exciting to watch this season. I think Lucas, who I think is covering Nice for GFFN this season, has got a really, really good gig because they look fantastic. They've got great new signs. Belhanda as well is a fantastic one. I'd almost forgotten he'd existed actually, but he was so exciting back in his, was it Montpellier? I think it was Montpellier, back in his Montpellier days. He was really, really excellent. So I think with Cosiello slowly starting to sort of come into the game a bit more, I think there's good things coming for Nice. And also just a final point on Balotelli, which I think is the sort of most talked about story for Nice's sort of transfer dealings. I honestly don't think he'll feature much. I don't think he's fit at the moment. I don't think that there's any way that Lucien Favre, who is a very, very smart manager, is going to pick him over Plié anytime soon, because I think Plié is a really, really excellent talent. He offers a lot. He's strong. He's fast. And I'm not sure what Balotelli can bring to the team that would make him a natural starter. So I don't think the Balotelli thing is going to make much difference, but the other two signings might just.
All right, Nathan, final word from you. Marseille were also busy in the waning stages of the transfer window, signing Rod Fani and William Banker, the former Roma player and under-21 French international. Positions that I think we all agree they needed help in, that being right back and central midfield. With these two in the team, it seems like a step up. Would you agree? And if so, what's the realistic ceiling for Marseille with a somewhat bolstered team?
I think they were more patches than necessarily big step-ups, really. Rod Fanny obviously had a really successful spell in France beforehand, but has been in and around the black at Al Arabi and was on loan at Charlton last season, so that really should tell you enough as it is, because they were abysmal. He's a good stopgap at least, and he knows French football, he knows Marseille, so it's not a bad player to bring in, but I don't think he's necessarily increasing the quality of the entire squad. Vanquer, in a different way, he's a solid player. I like him. They did need extra players in that central midfield area, although I was very impressed by Zinedine Machache against Lorient. I thought he played very well, so hopefully that doesn't sort of interfere with any of his playing time, because he really put himself about a bit in that game, and they needed the bit. But Marseille's ceiling doesn't change enormously. They were better against Lorient, but at the same time, Lorient clearly rolled over and let them tickle their bellies. Really, they were frankly abysmal, shall we say? It was a very, very poor performance, and it was so easy for Marseille to do what they wanted in that game. But that will hopefully boost their confidence. The fact that the ownership thing has been sorted now, at least for the time being, and they can put that to the back of their minds. They've added, like you say, a couple of players that will at least bolster their ranks, but this is still a team that will be aiming for top 10, but they'll be pretty lucky to get top 10 for me. They might just sneak it, but that's their ceiling, really. I don't see enough quality through the ranks to do better than that, unless everyone hits the form that they if everyone hits top form, then maybe, and then another couple of teams not playing as well. But this is still only a mid-table side. I can't see them being anything more than that.
All right, your prediction then for the match?
Good question. I actually fancy Nice. I love this. We've already mentioned. I love these signings. They're crazy, mental. They might work. They might not work. But it's worked before. So let's go for it again. Balanda's an excellent signing. I think they're going to win this one comfortably, 3-0.
Big scoreline. All right, Philip or Peter rather. Sorry.
Phil, who's Phil? I've never gone by Phil. That's my evil twin, actually.
My apologies. I'm in Monday mode.
I think it's going to be 2-2. I think Guns is going to score. So get yourself down to your local betting company for that one.
All right, Adam.
Or I might go 0-0 again. I think I don't see too many goals.
I was actually going to say the same thing. I'll go with a 1-0 win for for Nice rather. They've had, I believe, the league's best defense, only 1 goal conceded, if that sounds right. But in any event, that is our show for this week. We will be back next Thursday to wrap up a very, very busy slate of European matches for the 5 French sides in action. That's, again, Lyon, Monaco, and PSG in the Champions League, and Nice and Saint-Etienne in the Europa League. Please do join us on Monday for the GFFN show, hosted by Nathan and with Philip Bargio, not our current Peter Bowler. But thanks again, gentlemen.
Hold that, Philippe.
Yes. So thank you again, gentlemen. You can follow us on Twitter at GFFN for all your up-to-date news and goings-on from around France. Please be sure also to tune into the at GFFN Match Zone handle tomorrow to get full coverage of PSG versus Saint-Etienne. Thanks again, and until next week,